A boy has the right to dream.
Yeah, until life sucks the fucking soul out of you. The 90s were an important time in the Japanese anime market. A surge in popularity would set up the future of anime in the West, and would produce legendary shows on an equally legendary block of television. If you were around or grew up in the late 90s or early 2000s, you've likely heard of Toonami. Originally created by Sean Akins and Jason DeMarco, it was owned by Cartoon Network, and would go on to air some of the most popular animated shows in the history of television. The Dragon Ball series, the many different series of Gundam, and Sailor Moon all found their homes on Toonami. I remember coming home from school and rushing into the house to turn on the TV and catch the episodes of Dragon Ball Z that would air around the time I made it home. After the final bell rang, I'd run to the bus, hoping to get home as quickly as possible because that was the 1 hour my parents would allow me to watch TV before I started homework for the evening. Tom, the robot host of Toonami, was like a best friend that you couldn't wait to see again, and as we grew up, he was there for us. But 1995 to 1999 would also introduce some of the most influential anime ever created, including Berserk, Hunter x Hunter, Cowboy Bebop, Trigun, and Neon Genesis Evangelion. There were so many that were brought to the West in this time period, you can spend an entire 3-hour video talking about them and not cover them all. Don't worry, I won't be doing that. Unless. Some of the best anime at the time featured that gritty, more grainy art style, and I absolutely love that 90s anime aesthetic so much. It may have been a product of its time, but anime like that just feels special, and I feel that's why things like Berserk 97 and Cowboy Bebop have had such lasting power despite their short runs. 1997 was an even more important year for me because it was the year I was introduced to something that would become one of the most important things in my life: Final Fantasy VII. While I was only 6 and wasn't old enough to understand the story of 7, it started my love for Japanese-related media and would go on to inspire this YouTube channel. It featured a more anime aesthetic with its characters, and the large sword-wielding main character that was very popular among character designers at the time and still to this day, likely inspired by Guts from Berserk, I might add. Its gripping story about a group of ragtag individuals coming together on a grand adventure to save the planet, and along the way discovering who they are as people, is a story that we can all fundamentally resonate with. Something else a lot of us can probably all relate to is watching TV or playing video games way past what your bedtime was supposed to be, playing on low volume so you could listen for your parents coming down the hallway. I remember having a Game Boy with a small light so I could play Pokemon after my parents went to bed and would shove it under my pillow whenever I heard footsteps. And if you were a fan of anime, this was the perfect window of time to watch less censored anime on Toonami's Midnight Run block of programming. This program ran for me from about 11 p.m. Central Standard Time till 4 a.m., and I spent many a morning at school with an anime hangover but a smile on my face. Watching Midnight Run and Adult Swim felt like a rebellious action, as most of this anime featured more blood and swearing than the average daytime anime would at the time. It felt like freedom, but it also felt wrong and awesome, and was a large part of this time period sticking with me for my entire life. But there was one series that aired on that network that I'll never forget, an anime that would go on to become one of my favorite series of all time. This is a story about Outlaw Star. Created as a manga by Takehiko Ito and animated by the famous Sunrise Incorporated, Outlaw Star would release in 1998. While it's known as Bandai Namco Filmworks today, the studio is still recognized as Sunrise. Dating back to 1973 and going through multiple name changes, Sunrise would be the animation studio behind the legendary Mobile Suit Gundam series. Some other notable works include Outlaw Star, Cowboy Bebop, Inuyasha, and they even helped work on Pokemon 3 the movie. Unfortunately for Outlaw Star, it became more of a cult classic, which is due to being overshadowed by its contemporaries Cowboy Bebop and Trigun. While Cowboy Bebop is one of the greatest anime ever created, Outlaw Star has always had a special place in my heart due to its ragtag crew and its overall tone and atmosphere. Outlaw Star is a roller coaster ride that you never want to get off, at least until you get off watching episode 23, that is. I'm sorry. The show is fun, serious when it needs to be, and touches on themes such as dealing with your own mortality and what's important in life. It's not just a story about coming together to save the universe. It's a story about when given the ultimate choice of infinite money, knowledge, and power, do you choose the path of least resistance, or do you choose the path that means you may struggle in life, but you'll have those important to you by your side through it all? Outlaw Star asks those important questions of you. But it's not just all action and anime goodness. Outlaw Star is heavily influenced by other works and is deeply rooted in Chinese Taoist mysticism. We'll go into that a little later, but I want to discuss the history of Outlaw Star, the characters and story, and the atmosphere of the anime first. Outlaw Star first aired on TV Tokyo on January 8th, 1998, and its initial run would encompass 26 episodes, later coming to Western audiences through the Toonami block of Cartoon Network programming. This format seemed to be popular as both Cowboy Bebop and Trigun, which both released later that year, would also feature 26-episode runs. Outlaw Star would also be one of the major catalysts for popularizing the space western genre of anime, and despite releasing 4 months prior to Cowboy Bebop, which was also animated by Sunrise, it would quickly be overshadowed by it. This would lead to less exposure to audiences over time, and despite becoming more of a cult classic, it's criminal that Outlaw Star is so underrated. I mean, come on, it features a cat girl who's also a muscle mommy, a female samurai assassin, and a bio-android girl that gets naked almost every episode. And despite it not really seeming like it, this could definitely be considered a simpler version of a harem anime. Besides Jean and Jim, every other crew member of the Outlaw Star is a woman, and they all have some subtle and not so subtle romantic connections to main protagonist Jean Starwind. Despite positive reception from both fans and critics alike, Outlaw Star was not without its controversy though. Episode 23, titled Hot Springs Planet Tenrei, was banned from airing due to adult content and wouldn't air to Western audiences until February 24th, 2018 on Adult Swim. While this episode was definitely a filler episode, we did get a lot of in-universe lore about Jean's main weapon, the caster gun, and its magic-based ammunition, albeit with some gratuitous fan service that would get my channel demonetized if I showed you here. There was also heavy editing done to other episodes to ensure that Cartoon Network's censorship policies at the time were adhered to. Melfina, the android girl who Jean and Jim find in a box, was edited to feature black underclothes to avoid showing her partial nudity. It's actually kinda funny, because if you read the manga, it is way more explicit in nature than the anime ever thought about being. An example is that in the manga, there's an entire series of pages dedicated to Jean and Hilda having, relations, while discussing their plans for the future. But in the anime, it's only really hinted at until much later in the series that these relations even happened. The show also featured swearing that was censored by the network, but all episodes were later released uncensored years later. Those who bought the Outlaw Star DVDs or are watching on streaming sites such as Hulu will have all uncensored anime episodes available to them. Which, by the way, if you have Hulu, stop the video, go watch Outlaw Star, and come back. Are you still here? What are you doing? Go! Watch Outlaw Star! Alright, now that you're back, I know what you did when you got to episode 23, and Melfina isn't mad, she's just very disappointed in you.
Oh, sorry you can't perform. That's too bad.
It also can't be said that the spaceships in this show are boring because a lot of the ship designs are extremely unique. And the talent that made those ships involved someone that many Gundam and Macross fans will recognize, Shoji Kawamori, alongside Juniya Ishigaki. Kawamori would go on to design the Outlaw Star itself. They also feature a very unique design due to a lot of the ships featuring grappling arms that serve a wide variety of functions. They can be used in hand-to-hand ship combat, carry weapons such as guns and axes, and can also use tools like saw blades. They did a really good job of making it okay to bring hands to a gunfight and even show some ships punching each other in the face. The series also makes great use of color and tone to sell its aesthetic to the audience. There's one scene in the beginning of the show where Jean is sitting in bed with a lady in the night, the lights of the city in the background behind him, the soft blue hue of the lighting showing a sense of loneliness even though Jean is clearly in the room with someone, the lights of the city behind them showing that life is moving along without them. There's also a scene much later where Melfina and a drunk and depressed Jean are talking. Instead of just showing the characters, the room is dark and all you can see at certain points is their silhouettes, going back and forth from characters to silhouettes in the moment. I do want to talk about this moment later because it's thematically important to Jean and Melfina's journey together though. The universe of Outlaw Star is shown with such bright colors and beautiful landscapes, and even the antagonists are somewhat colorful. The Outlaw Star grappler ship even undergoes a massive color change as Jean makes it the same color as his bright red hair. Color is used so well within the show that without it, I don't think the aesthetic would be nearly as appealing. Outlaw Star also featured a great soundtrack, with the opening theme song Through the Night being an absolute banger, and the original ending theme has beautiful melodies and lyrics. The show is sometimes self-aware of what it has going on for it, as they utilize the theme song in cool ways in the show itself. At one point, the crew takes on a job to help an advertising ship, and as they pull up to the ship, the Outlaw Star opening theme is blasting through its speakers. Another moment is when the crew is at the Temple of the Dragon God, and Melfina steps away from everything and is seen on a cliff. As she stands there looking at the horizon, she's singing to the exact instrumentals of the original closing theme.
Someone, please tell me, what is it that I say, maybe I will know one day.
The closing theme actually ends up playing into the character of Harry McDougal as he asks Gene for his last request to ask Melfina to sing the song again. The music in this show gives you a hyped up action feel most of the time, but knows when to dial it down to set the tone of a moment or just give you that 50s noir police detective bar feeling. This also plays into the color and atmosphere of the show and really ties the whole thing together into one cohesive package that's pulled off extremely well in selling the space western vibes of the show. As we've stated a few times, Outlaw Star is a part of the now famous space western genre of anime. Lawlessness, fighting for survival, and danger around every corner all make up the feel and atmosphere of Outlaw Star. You can definitely tell that Star Wars had a major impact on Japanese mangaka over the years, as the space western genre feels very Star Wars in nature. Outlaw Star features things like Taoist magic and caster guns, which are a mix of old magic and technology, and this mixture is seen throughout the series. The weapons are also very basic in nature, with guns, swords, and hand-to-hand combat being the main on-foot options. Even in space, the main source of combat for the Outlaw Star are the grappler arms that specialize in hand-to-hand combat with other ships. While Star Wars didn't have grappler combat ships, it did have a type of religious mysticism mixed with basic combat weapons that stands out as a staple in this genre. The creator, Takahiko Ito, even claims that Star Trek and Star Wars were huge inspirations for just about everything he's ever created, and these influences are seen throughout the entirety of Outlaw Star's 26 episodes. Both are space westerns, and even though Outlaw Star is so often forgotten among its contemporaries, Ito helped bring that genre to the anime space and did so extremely well. While ship combat is the highlight of this series, there's plenty of on-planet fights between Gene and the K-Pirates, or even Gene and the McDougal brothers. Most of the time, Gene can either hold his own or at least doesn't seem to overwhelm too much, that is until he faces Lei Long of the On-10-7 and barely survives. Gene isn't above using underhanded tactics to win and lives up to his job as an outlaw on several occasions. There's also a scene where he's actually being chased by a K-Pirate assassin and tricks him into thinking Gene's dying by a tree, only for him to pull a fast one and attempt a sneak attack. He may be our protagonist, but that doesn't mean he's above doing whatever it takes to survive, even if it's not considered honorable combat tactics. So now that we've discussed the history and the tone and the atmosphere of the show, let's do a quick summary of the plot of Outlaw Star. On the backwater planet of Sentinel-3, our main protagonist Gene Starwind and his business partner, 11-year-old Jim Hawking, run a small business doing odd jobs for cash. When they take on a job from a mysterious woman, they get more than they bargained for as they become involved in a galaxy-spanning conflict with a group known as the K-Pirates. Along the way, they recruit members for their crew, obtain a new ship, and head towards the goal of reaching the galactic ley line, the center point of the galaxy said to feature treasure beyond imagination. Eventually, the crew have several run-ins with other factions, including the K-Pirates and McDougal brothers. Kinda sounds a bit like One Piece, and to be honest, this is definitely a story that is more about the journey than necessarily about the destination. With that out of the way, let's discuss the characters. Gene Starwind is basically the Han Solo of Outlaw Star, albeit a goofy and fly-by-the-seat-of-his-pants type character. While he outwardly appears as a cool, fearless gun-for-hire, Gene has an ironic and crippling fear of space due to an attack that saw his father killed and Gene left alone in the universe. Sometimes even the sight of stars can throw Gene into a bout with PTSD, but he slowly gets over that as the show goes on. Gene is also a womanizer throughout the entire series and can be seen making bold attempts to get laid. While he does act like this towards girls he meets in his adventures, he does show some respect and restraint most of the time with his female crew members. Because I know you weren't paying attention to Gene in episode 23, I'll just say that that's why I said it's most of the time. Jim Hawking is an 11-year-old engineer and Gene's business partner in Starwind and Hawking Enterprises. He's almost the complete opposite of Gene, as he's more about working hard for maybe less money than taking huge risks for bigger payoffs. He's also really respectful to women, sometimes intercepting Gene's more womanizing antics. He has a deep love for Melfina, and the two are more of a mother and son, due to Jim not really having parents who take care of him. Speaking of Jim, it's pretty clear that this manga and anime were inspired by several works, but a really famous one would be Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island. There's the obvious galactic ley line inspiration, but the name connection of Jim Hawkins, the main character of Treasure Island, and Jim Hawking, Gene Starwind's partner and brains of the operation, is pretty obvious too. Melfina is the bio-android girl that Gene and Jim find in a large case on their job with Hot Ice Hilda, an outlaw in search of the galactic ley line. Wait a minute. Joss Whedon, you son of a... It's later revealed that Melfina is another piece of the puzzle of the galactic ley line. Throughout the story, she struggles with who she is and why she was created, but discovers those answers at Journey's End. Speaking of Hot Ice Hilda, she becomes a catalyst for this entire adventure when she hires Jean to be her bodyguard against the K-Pirates. Little does Jean know what he's getting himself into, but he ends up demonetizing Hilda, so I'd say it was probably worth it. She leads them to finding the XGP grappler ship, a highly advanced ship which, combined with Melfina, is the key to finding the galactic ley line. As Jean, Jim, and Melfina escape Farfallus orbit with XGP, Hilda sacrifices herself in order to allow them to escape, taking down a group of K-Pirate leaders with her. She speaks to Jean's spirit in his darkest hour at the end of the show, helping him realize the inner peace that he's searching for. Twilight Suzuka is the next crew member and is the beautiful but deadly samurai assassin. Dedicated to not only her craft but also her pride, Twilight Suzuka not only shares a mutual respect with Jean, but protects her newfound friends even if it would mean her death. But she didn't start out that way, as originally she was attempting to kill both Fred Lowe and Jean due to her latest contract. Jean and Suzuka face off, with Jean metaphorically killing her, releasing her from her contract and freeing her to do as she wishes. While not always taking part in their adventures, she's very much an important member of the crew and comes up clutch in the end of the show. Her weapon of choice is a wooden practice sword which she channels Tao magic into for her secret techniques. Suzuka also takes the nickname Twilight as she only kills her targets as the sun is setting, hence the name Twilight Suzuka. Aisha Clan is the final humanoid crew member and is the Catgirl and Muscle Mommy comic relief character, but that doesn't stop her from being a fierce master of hand-to-hand combat. A member of the Katarl Empire, which she'll definitely tell you about, has the ability to transform into a powerful big cat and has super strength. She may have some run-ins with Jean and is quick to take jabs at him, but she loves the crew she's found herself a part of and would defend them to the death. Her friendly rivalry with Jean aside, Aisha struggles with finding her place in the universe and hopes to find the galactic ley line in order to impress the leaders of the Empire. Gilliam rounds out the crew and is the AI companion of the Outlaw Star. Kinda think of him like Edie from Mass Effect. He helps maintain the Outlaw Star, assisting in its day-to-day operations and giving diagnostics to Jean and the crew. He also isn't afraid to give Jean shit about messing up, and is a genuinely well-meaning artificial intelligence system built into the Outlaw Star. There's also a few key factions to know about. The K-Pirates are the main antagonists of the series, with Lord Hazanko being the main bad guy of them all. While we see a lot of K-Pirate leaders throughout the show, they typically don't stick around longer than an episode or two, and we don't really get much motivation for them besides recovering Melfina and the Outlaw Star. However, Lord Hazanko, the leader of the On-10-7, a group of deadly K assassins, seeks out the galactic ley line in hopes of gaining infinite power. He sends the On-10-7 after Jean on a few occasions, but Jean always finds a way to overcome them, even if it is mostly by luck. Just know that Hazanko is the most important key player of the K-Pirates, as that will be important for later. The McDougal brothers are also key players, as they tend to be there to stop Jean and the crew of the Outlaw Star at every turn, with Harry later being revealed to be a bio-android much like Melfina. The McDougal brothers are basically outlaws that will do anything for money and self-preservation, most of the time resulting in heavy casualties. Ronald McDougal, is the oldest of the two brothers and is the level-headed leader. Harry is revealed to have been created from special cellular data in a test tube. He attempts to get Melfina to go away with him several times, having a romantic interest in her, due to them both not really knowing their purpose in life. They're directly responsible for the death of Jean's father, which gives an added layer to their already complicated, unfriendly rivalry. Their presence in the show is very much a lesser antagonist in the grand scheme of things, but are more on the humanity side of things, as opposed to the K-Pirates, who are more of a mystical background. There's also some minor factions, but still important ones to discuss. There's a sort of space government called the Space Forces, and they don't feature much in the story, but are key players nonetheless, as they collaborated with the K-Pirates to create both Melfina and the Outlaw Star, kinda setting up this whole thing. Fred Lowe is a reoccurring character who loans Jean lots of money to help with repairs and supplies for the Outlaw Star. Fred clearly has a crush on Jean, which was edited down heavily for the Toonami run of the show, and does these favors out of a genuine love and friendship for Jean. He's a really well-written character, but does have his fair share of comic relief moments. Win Khan is the typical scientist character you see in a lot of different pieces of media. He doesn't care about anything other than achieving all the knowledge of the universe, and his goal is to use the galactic ley line for this end. He's somewhat like Professor Hojo in Final Fantasy VII if you're a fan of that game. The themes of Outlaw Star ask many questions, identity and what does humanity really mean being key among them. Melfina is a bio-android created by the K-Pirates and the Space Forces, but also has no real memory of her past or why she was even created. As she navigates these questions, the crew of the Outlaw Star help to answer them along the way. While her purpose in universe is more obvious and she obtains those answers as well, it asks more of a philosophical question. What constitutes human life, and does Melfina deserve to live and be happy as any other human? She wishes to be with Jean and the crew of the Outlaw Star and live life as any other human would. Harry McDougal is also a bio-android like Melfina, yet he represents the other side by rejecting humanity and spends his moments with her attempting to get her to run away with him, to live a life outside of normal humans and embrace their bio-android nature. While Melfina does reject his advances, he does cause her to have some self-reflection, and she eventually does wish for him to find inner peace. Now, from this description, you'd think that this anime is dark, intelligent, and something in the same vein as Berserk or Evangelion, and while it has its moments of that wouldn't be an accurate way of describing Outlaw Star. We have a cactus that can use mind control, a cat girl riding a giant cockroach monster, spaceships that punch each other in the face, and the main protagonist is a grab-ass playing pervert that can't help but think with his dick whenever he sees a pretty girl. We also have a clearly gay merchant that can't get enough of Jean, even going so far as to hire him to defeat a woman in a tournament so he doesn't have to marry her. By the way, Fred is fucking awesome, and I'll have no Fred Lowe slander in my comments section. For every serious moment of the show, there's an equal, if not more irreverent moment waiting in the wings to strike. Every character is flawed, yet finds way to be endearing to the viewer, and makes for one of the best cast of characters I've ever seen in an anime. Yes, there are moments of fan service, and yes, there are moments that don't really push the plot along, but every moment is meaningful in its own way. That's not to say that Outlaw Star is completely crazy all the time, but its tone is much different from that of Cowboy Bebop, which may or may not have hurt its popularity at the time. And on that topic of hurting its popularity, we talked about censorship a while back in this video, and thinking on it while recording an episode of The Gaming Effect, I discovered that maybe the popularity of this show was hurt by the way it was portrayed. It turns out while watching it again for this video, I noticed a lot of differences between the uncensored version and the Cartoon Network version. One key example is the scene where Hilda sacrifices herself for the Outlaw Star crew to escape. In the Cartoon Network version, it makes it seem like Hilda and the K-Pirates just fall into Farfallis. However, in the uncensored version, she bites down on a bomb, committing sewer slide, but also takes the K-Pirates with her. There's also the interactions with Fred Lowe that were cut due to its portrayal of Fred being gay in the uncensored version. This kind of changes the character arcs of some of these characters and would understandably change how people look at the story and the characters themselves. But back to when I talked about flawed characters, Jean is by far the biggest example of what I mean. Yes, he's the protagonist of the series, but he's not your typical infallible hero character. While we briefly discussed his womanizing and his struggle with his feelings toward Melfina, this is core to understanding his character. When faced with death at the hands of Lei Long of the Onten 7, Jean is given one day to get his affairs in order and decides to spend that day drinking. Jean up to this point has led such a fast life that he hasn't had time to face his mortality for real, but given only one day to live, it becomes all he thinks about. He even turns down the advances of a woman in the bar he's drinking in. My guy must have been real depressed to turn down some ass on the last day of his life. Later on, alone in the dark, drunk and depressed, Jean is laying down while Melfina tries to comfort him and ends up grabbing her, their silhouettes showing the struggle. When she rejects his advances, he yells at her and insults her life as a bio-android, asking if her feelings are only because of her programming. Jean lashes out at her, making her cry, then immediately regrets what he's done, hiding his face from her. The next day when the fight with Lei Long begins, he is completely outclassing Jean, and it's pretty clear that no matter what tactic Jean employs, it's not going to work this time. But Jean doesn't end up fighting him alone, as the entire crew of the Outlaw Star shows up to defend their friend. It's in this moment that despite his flaws and giving Melfina and crew every reason not to, they support him anyway because they care deeply for him. Lei Long actually makes quick work of all of them, but with a stroke of luck, his gun misfires, allowing Jean to shoot him. It's revealed later that he actually survives, and as he recovers, he wishes Jean good luck and moves on with his life as a free man away from the Onten 7. This is the first and maybe only time that we see a member of the K-Pirates not really wanting to be a part of them anymore. Lei Long just wants a quiet life, and to this point, and pretty much every point after, all the K-Pirates have been pretty dedicated to this lifestyle. But it's not just the K-Pirates or the McDougal brothers that give Jean trouble, as we also see Jean get knocked down a few pegs as a bounty hunter, and it's just another example of how the crew members have a friendly rivalry but still care about each other. When looking for money, Jean takes on a contract to kill a dangerous target named Zonba. After killing what he believes to be the real Zonba, Jean collects the reward, however it's discovered that it wasn't the real one and was just a cyborg. Twilight Suzuka shows up and has taken the bounty of the real Zonba, not only demonstrating her skills as an assassin, but also one-upping Jean as a bounty hunter. It's funny moments like these that really accent the overall feel of the crew's relationship with each other. Even though Gene is technically the leader, it's clear that he's not the most skilled or even the best at any one thing. He's charismatic yet flawed, and people feel a drive to rally around him, sometimes even bailing him out of serious trouble. For a Japanese-created series, Outlaw Star also features a massive amount of Chinese influence in almost every aspect. Building architecture, symbolism, even Chinese mysticism, and the principles of Taoism are all present here. You can see this in almost every single episode and even in the opening credits of the show. The yin-yang symbols, dragons, and even Taoist magic are everywhere, and the inspiration is obvious. The K-Pirates employ this magic in combat, and Gene's caster gun fires bullets that resemble Taoist magic, and when fired against it, seems to cancel out those attacks. They even combine the dragon with the yin-yang symbol that's located throughout the show's intro and even some of the episodes. The logo for the show even features the yin-yang symbol. Needless to say, the concepts of Taoism, or the Way in English, are very influential on Outlaw Star. Taoism is a Chinese religion based on the principles of self-cultivation and striving for a more harmonious existence, accepting one's life and learning to flow with life. These are not only the pillars of Taoism, but also the core themes of the show itself. There's also a reference to Chinese folklore, as Hazanko is a member of the 108 Stars, which is in reference to an old Chinese story named Suikoden. No, not that one, although that Suikoden is still inspired directly by that story. I digress. Anyway, the story of Suikoden is basically the Robin Hood story of China and featured 108 warriors. In Outlaw Star, the 108 warriors is a very powerful section of the K-Pirates faction, which are Chinese in nature. The final stretch of the show has so much going on, but it's a culmination of everything that's happened to this point, so we definitely need to talk about this ending before we wrap up. This entire time, Hazanko has had one goal, and that goal is to rule the K-Pirates and the universe with an iron fist. He wants the power to defeat the Tendo King and the Tenpa Emperor, as they're the only two people in the universe that are more powerful than him. Hazanko doesn't care about money or even life itself, only power and control. He was actually asked to take on the Leyline project by the Tendo King, and used his vast wealth and power to financially back the creation of both the Outlaw Star and Melfina in the hope of turning on the king when he obtained that power. This all led every player involved, including Gene and his crew and the McDougal brothers, to this final conflict inside the Leyline. The On-Ten 7 members that are still alive attempt to stop the crew of the Outlaw Star from reaching the heart of the Leyline. Aisha faces off against the spiked straitjacket wearing Jukai, Suzuka faces off against Hitoriga, and Gene has to face Hamushi, Ronald McDougal, and Lord Hazanko. Toby Guerra, who's been the comic relief member of the On-Ten 7, ends up fusing with the monstrosity that Hazanko becomes after his wish for ultimate power is granted by the Leyline. Back to Harry McDougal, because there's a lot of character development for him here. As he tries to save Melfina from Hazanko, he's brutally defeated and with his dying breath, allows Gene into the heart of the Leyline. He'd uploaded his personality into the McDougal ship, allowing him to live on within it for his brother. Harry's sacrifice, and following that up with allowing Gene the access he needs to save Melfina, gives him that shred of humanity he's lacked throughout the entire show, making his development come full circle. Win Khan has his wish granted, and he joins the Leyline after it turns him into Data. Using the powerful but life-draining shells he received on the Hot Spring planet, Gene risks it all to save Melfina. Knowing he only has 4 shells left and that they'll end his life should he fire the final one, he doesn't care as long as Melfina is saved. He fires the first of these against Hamushi, the second against Ron McDougal, and the third and fourth against Hazanko, ending his own life. After Gene defeats Ronald McDougal, he passes out and starts to have a moment of peace with himself where he sees his father, Hilda, and Melfina, and it's the first time that Gene is shown to truly know who he is, what he fights for, and who he loves. However, as stated earlier, his wish inside the Leyline is granted, and as the Maiden of the Leyline, Melfina is able to revive him, setting up the final confrontation with Hazanko. After a battle in both reality and cyberspace, Gene and the crew of the Outlaw Star defeat the monstrosity that Hazanko has become, ending his reign of terror forever. Once the crew has defeated Hazanko, Melfina is freed from her role as the Maiden of the Leyline, and for the first time is allowed to continue living her life the way she's always wanted, as a normal human being. The Leyline AI moves the Leyline to a new location, and the crew leave it forever. They return to Sentinel-3 where Gene has been imprisoned for an earlier incident. Bailed out by Jim using Fred Lowe's money, the two set off into space with Melfina onto their next adventure, but when they break down and need repairs, they discover that Aisha and Suzuka were on board that repair ship, waiting to go with Gene and the crew again. Seemingly all making peace with themselves and their lot in life, the ragtag crew of misfits sets off on yet another adventure to new horizons, and the story of Outlaw Star comes to an end. Despite the crazy antics of the crew of the Outlaw Star, there's deep messages to be learned from them. To its core, it's a story about finding one's identity and making peace with one's inner self. The galactic ley line isn't necessarily the answer they seek, more so the means to that end. It's not until Gene reaches the ley line and makes the ultimate sacrifice that he knows exactly what he wants from life. He wants Melfina to remain with him forever, and she wishes for the same thing. This allows her to use the ley line to revive Gene, and it lets them defeat Lord Hazanko even though he's asked for absolute power. Even while in cyberspace, the battle seemed lost, but by realizing what matters most in his life, Gene overcomes Lord Hazanko, defeating him once and for all. Twilight Suzuka seems calm and collected and that nothing matters besides her duty as an assassin, but we discover at the ley line that she has one inner demon she must face. A demon from her past, Hitoriga. Responsible for killing her entire family during a contract, Hitoriga is the only man to ever best Suzuka in sword combat and is a member of the Onten 7, Lord Hazanko's deadly assassins. He ends up taking on her appearance, which to me symbolizes that not only is Hitoriga her enemy, but she must also defeat herself in order to find her inner peace. She defeats him with a secret technique she'd been saving for the day she finally faced him again, and all roads for her led to this point. Not only does Suzuka kill Hitoriga, she effectively moves on from her past in peace. Aisha Clan is a proud member of the Kataral Empire, but when she continues to make a mess of things, she becomes an outcast. Pride wounded and looking for a way to be welcomed back into the Empire, she does what she needs to do to survive, but feels that doing so is below her station. Eventually, she decides that life means more than her station in it, and remains by Gene's side to the very end, defeating Jukai and helping save Melfina. Aisha's journey teaches us that no matter what your origins, whether you're high or low on the pecking order, you aren't defined by where you're from, but by how you choose to make your path and where you're headed. As for Jim, either I missed it or it wasn't there, but Jim Hawking seems to be about the only crew member that doesn't really have any of these things. Jim knows who he is for the most part, and is the brains of the operation when Gene is being the bullheaded, shoot first, ask question later kind of guy. The one moment he really has is when he meets Hanmyo and her cats, never realizing that she's one of the Onten 7. They share a moment of young love with Jim bringing her flowers, yet ultimately it's Jim that unknowingly helps end her life. He laments missing their date and asks the questions.
The big stuff like, what do people exist for? What's in my heart? Who am I?
Questions that we all seek, and Outlaw Star tries to answer those. Speaking of Hanmyo and Taoism, her cats feature the same color scheme of the yin and yang symbols, as one cat is black with a little bit of white, and the other is white with a little bit of black. I think the biggest takeaway from Jim is that he's only 11 at the time of the show, and while his whole life is ahead of him, he doesn't really have the same worries about life that the more adult characters would have at this point. This shows not only the innocence of a character that feels more adult in his logic, but also that life was a much simpler view when we were younger. And that, as they say, is that. Even though Outlaw Star ended as quickly as it arrived, it stayed with me since the moment I discovered it, and as an adult, its themes and messages still resonate with me to this day. An ancient relic from my formative years, it stood the test of time as one of my favorite anime series ever, and one that I'll always carry with me throughout my life. It reminds me of a time when working, bills, and relationships didn't really matter, when not getting caught watching late night television was our only worry. So if there's one message that you should take from this video, it's that Catgirl muscle mommies and hot springs are fucking awesome. Hey guys, thanks for watching. This was a lot of fun to make, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you're a fan of Outlaw Star and want to see more video essays like this. I do want to give a special thank you to my current channel members, as your support is appreciated and helps keep me motivated to make videos just like this one. Gabriel Babowski, Tara Queen, Ultima Weapon 2000, and Carl Barker. Thank you guys very much, and I appreciate all your support. If you want to join these four in supporting the channel, there's a join button or membership tab where you can join for as little as $2.99 a month. You'll not only receive a special badge next to your name that upgrades based on the length of your membership, but also receive exclusive emotes for the channel and shoutouts like these at the end of videos. You can also just like, subscribe, and comment for that algorithm too. Any and all support is appreciated. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.